O MTB PES Gregário é apresentado por Jungle e Ultra Coffee, a combinação que eleva sua performance. Plant Power. Perform your best.
Bem-vindo ao MTB PES, um podcast que te leva para dentro do mundo do mountain bike. Eu sou a Viviane Favery e trago aqui a cada 15 dias entrevistas com algum personagem do mountain bike mundial. O convidado de hoje é o escocês Kenta Gallagher, treinador técnico da equipe Cannondale Factory Racing. Kenta tem um papel de bastidores que mostra a importância de um processo no contato com a pista nas corridas de cross-country olímpico. Nessa entrevista falamos sobre sua carreira, que navegou em diferentes disciplinas do ciclismo, incluindo o XCE, Cross Country Eliminator, e aqui vale uma chamada para você ouvir, se ainda não ouviu, o programa com a Marcela Lima. A gente também fala do seu papel na CFR, que é a equipe do Henrique Avancini, e como funciona esse processo de adaptação dos atletas para cada pista, algo que todos os amadores podem se espelhar, principalmente com as pistas de XCO progredindo bastante no Brasil. Esse programa, então, é a minha colaboração para a discussão que aconteceu recentemente em torno do nível técnico das pistas da CI MTB de Petrópolis e de Taubaté. Com vocês, Kenta Gallagher. Kenta Gallagher, thank you so much for saying yes to our invitation, and I want to shoot you a straightforward question. What do you do for a living?
So for a living, I work for a mountain bike team called Cannondale Factory Racing, and I am the technical coach of the team.
How did it happen that you ended up as the Cannondale Factory Racing technical coach?
It's quite a long story. So basically, Phil Dixon, who is the performance manager of the team, used to coach me when I was really young, up until I was about 22 years old. And he stopped British cycling and moved to Cannondale, and I stopped cross country and I moved to downhill. From there, I was racing downhill, and I still spoke to him now and again. And he just offered me to come out to a training camp to do some technical work with some of the riders, not just of Cannondale, but some of the other riders he coached at the time. So I went out there to South Africa and basically just gave them some pointers or used my experience from both downhill and cross country and combined it for them. And I think it worked out really well. So the first World Cup in 2019 in Albstadt, they flew me out just to do some track analysis with them and just be on course and show them the lines and just kind of get their bikes dialed in. So from there, it kind of every World Cup they would ask me to go. I couldn't make them all, but I tried to make most of them. And it kind of ended up going from there, really.
Kenta, there's multiple aspects where road biking and mountain biking are different sports. One of the main aspects is mountain biking is much more technical and does your role. And as it happens in cross country, it happens on a track, so it's multiple laps where consistency plays a big factor on winning or losing. Can you share with us your technical expertise and your contribution to the teams on how perfecting the lines and studying the track and understanding so much of the consistency is achieved by the riders advised and coached by you?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, when they see me on track or they ask what I do, they initially think that I just go there to search out the fastest lines. That can only stretch so far, in the sense of like every rider is different and their riding style is different. Their strengths and weaknesses are different. So for me to just point out one line for everybody isn't the case. And I just kind of went in with this idea of I ride with the riders on the team, and I know their strengths and weaknesses. So I know which line I can point them into, which would work for them. And I guess it's not always about the downhill lines. It's also some of the technical climbs, like just trying to push where they're looking, where they're putting the power down. If some of the riders aren't as powerful as others, they need to invest a bit more energy before a certain section. So I think you can kind of get the wrong end of what I do, in a sense of it's just purely the track, but it's the track plus whatever rider I'm working with. So I think being consistent in the World Cup circuit now is so key, because it's all about saving your energy in downhills and giving the maximum in the uphills and the transitions. And I think if you can knock out the most consistent laps, if you're racing 6 laps and you can save 10 seconds a lap, I mean, that's 1 minute, and some World Cups are won by less than 1 minute, you know?
And Viviane, if I'm not mistaken, there's a recent stage of the World Cup that, please help me, but I think was Nino who selected the longest course in one segment of the track.
Yeah.
And he consistently did that, and he was faster indeed, even though in distance he was traveling longer.
Yeah, exactly. So Nino was doing the beeline in Petropolis and also in another course that I don't recall right now. So maybe, Kenta, when do you actually go for the beeline? When do you choose that line as the best line for you?
So they try and make the beeline slower, but it doesn't always work out that way. Mm-hmm. But I think when you go back to Nino's time in Brazil in the A and the beeline does make sense if you're fast at turn speed. So Nino himself is probably one of the best technical bike riders out there. And he knows his corner speed's going to be quicker than someone he knows is slower in a straight line. Mm-hmm. So if he's stuck behind someone, all it takes is for someone to make a mistake, put their foot out, and then he's running into the back of them. So mm-hmm. I guess if he feels like he can match the speed on the turns, he'll just go the opposite way, not just because it's faster, but maybe it just stops a collision if somebody like slips out or something. So I guess it's risk management as well.
Yeah. And since we're talking about beeline, when we have to choose the beeline because it's more adequate for you as a rider because of your the skills, how does it play a role in confidence as a rider? Like, okay, you're not riding the A line, you have to ride the B line. Can you also help the athletes to be okay with choosing the B line?
Yeah, I think it's all to do with when I go on the track with some riders, and they're not always confident every weekend. Sometimes it can get wet and then they think more. But I basically try and push the point where if you have to think about something on the track in practice, you're going to make a mess of it in the race under pressure. And I think you need to be able to hit the lines that you can do over and over and over again without thinking. Mm-hmm. So if I can't, in practice days, get a rider to hit a line safe every time and clean it every time, and there's another line, then I would always go with the line they can do the safest, the most consistent, and they don't worry about it in the race.
So what if you had to line down to put down 3 aspects that you consider when choosing a line? For sure, like consistency and safety, and then speed, probably? Consistency
for sure is my number one. You have to be able to clean something over and over again, like I say. I'd say how committed they are to the section, because some sections you need to be so committed where you would gap over the rocks, or you would be able to skip over the rocks with your bike with a certain momentum. And if you don't have that, then you're actually losing speed because you fall in the holes or whatever. Yeah. And I guess safety ultimately is the biggest thing, because you don't want to have any crashes. I mean, crashes happen for sure at all times, and it's not always the rider's fault, but just finding a line that they can safely do, and there's no risk of punctures or, getting a mechanical as well.
Different riders have different capacity to withstand stress, physical stress over the course of a race. And the stress plays a role on the consistency, on how this rider is really thinking and making the correct decisions on his handling. And I imagine this is what you said before on strengths and weaknesses, because it's not just a matter of exercising, training, and so forth. Sometimes different minds take different stresses level over time, and that plays a role. On that kind of rider that is more, let's say, less strong, mentally speaking, how do you address this kind of rider on the technical course, knowing that on the last laps, that person is going to be less able to handle the bike?
Yeah, so I guess the way cross country is going just now, the duration's getting shorter and shorter, so you do have to be very, very on it up and down the hill. So the physical demand is actually almost matching the technical demand. Mm-hmm. And I think the fitter you are as a rider, obviously the more consistent you can be throughout the race. So if you start burning the matches, like we say, on every climb, and you get to the downhill and you're not physically in the greatest shape, you do make mistakes. And I think then you get mechanicals and punctures because you get a bit lazy with the bike. But I think a lot of riders now are realizing in this new era of mountain biking and cross country that technical skills are so high up now that you can't win and lose a race due to not being quick enough down the hill, or not just quick enough, but consistent enough, hitting your lines every time and being comfortable with the race speed. So I guess with the riders, it's so easy to do practice and just ride the technical sections at a practice pace. But when it comes to a race, I think you get shot out your comfort zone because you're not used to the speed that the front people are going. So now I kind of try and drag them up to speed slowly so that by the last few training sessions on the track, they're going not 100%, but 80% of what they could be going. And I believe that you need to be 80 to 100% in some sections to not lose the wheel, but you have to be comfortable enough to do that with a high heart rate.
Now, we've been talking a lot about your role at CFR, but I want to talk about your career because you did XCE, you did downhill enduro. What else have you done that can contribute to what you're doing now?
So yeah, I guess my career started with cross country and downhill combined. I did some cyclocross when I was younger and some road racing. So I basically done every off-road discipline you could think of, except the likes of four cross. So I've dipped my toes in a lot of different events.
Have you ever done a cyclocross?
Yeah, so I competed in 2 under-23 world championships, got a couple of under-23 national medals and Scottish championships in cyclocross.
It's kind of an obvious question, but how do you compare cyclocross with cross-country mountain biking?
Yeah, so I guess that's a hard one because if I said mountain bike was harder than cyclocross, I mean the cyclocross would laugh at us, vice versa. But I believe that to be the best at any sport, you need to be very high up. But I think when people look at cyclocross, they look at the likes of Tom Pidcock, Mathieu van der Poel, Wout van Aert, and they obviously are very, very strong athletes. But I think they're just superhuman and they chose one discipline that they could really thrive off. And then from that one discipline, they kind of ventured onto the road or they did some mountain biking. But I believe that mountain biking is harder in a sense of variability. The tracks are so different, the technicals way higher in cross country, there's a lot more climbing per lap, the race is longer, and I just think all the demands are very, very different.
And how do you feel like all your experience as a mountain bike racer and cyclocross racer help you do your job with CFR now?
So I think there's probably a lot of other boys from the downhill in the world that could give the same opinion as I give on the track, as in line choice and stuff. But I think the difference between me to other people is I've raced cross country. I know the demands and I know the feeling you get when you've gone up a really, really steep climb for 2 minutes and then all of a sudden you turn 90 degrees and you come down one of the most technical chutes ever. And then I think the mentality changes and the way you ride the bike changes, which means the lines would ultimately change. And I think that's kind of the difference because it's so easy to be like, okay, we need to get from A to B down the hill really fast, but that's not always the case. It's A to B fast, but being able to recover and being risk-free.
Kenta, are there technology tools that you discovered and started to use in order to help you execute your job, your function?
On a cross-country bike? Sorry, I just had to cut you because we see a lot of riders that have the opportunity to bring someone to show lines with them, but more common than not, these coaches, they're not riding a cross-country bike. So you're actually riding the same bike as the riders.
So yeah, exactly. That's the biggest thing for me is there's absolutely no point in me riding an e-bike around the track. There's no point in me riding an enduro bike on the track because that's not what they race. So I basically run the exact same equipment that they would run because go fast down the hill on a cross-country bike is so different to going fast on even a cross-country bike with enduro tires. Everything just feels so different.
What tires are you using on your bike?
So I just use the Schwalbe, whichever the guys run, I'll just put on my bike normally.
Right.
So it's a selection of depending on conditions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And Kenta, going back to my tech question, does it make sense or would it make sense to analyze the power files, the ratio between RPMs, BPMs, and watts produced on the cross-country mountain biking in order to identify some spots that maybe the heart rate could go a little lower than it's happening and choosing a different line or choosing a different gear set?
Yeah, I think to a certain degree, but I think sports evolved and there's a lot of sports science and there's a lot of numbers and you can throw as many numbers as you want to an athlete. But at the end of the day, they just want to go fast. So if you were to study all the things that you just said, I think it gives them something else to think about in a negative term. And they're already there at the race weekend and all they want to do is get round this weekend fast. I think you could probably overanalyze a lot of things because I think in mountain biking, gravity discipline, any discipline, I think having a happy head means you'll go fast, and the less you think, the faster you go.
Yeah.
Kenta, could you share with us and our listeners, and I'm here representing the non-informed, so the road cyclists is more than the mountain bikers, a moment or a specific race where there was that aha moment that your contribution, in your view, made a significant difference on the performance of that rider. And I imagine those are rare because you're always working on minimal gains and small gains, but incremental ones. But do you recall any stories that you can share with us? Your contribution made a material change to that ride or to that race?
I guess because every weekend's so different and they don't always communicate the fact that they say the little things made the big difference at the end of the day. And I think it's kind of like an underground feeling that we share good times and stuff, but no one will be like, okay, that line made me fast, because I don't believe a race is won on lines and stuff. It just helps the process of all the hard work they've put in at home. So I think they're probably more appreciative of the fitness and the form. But I think, to be honest, the last two races, so that was Snowshoe and Mont Saint Anne, with Mona, we do the track as we do, but she wanted to do another lap, but maybe she was tired or overthinking, or there was just something. And I think just being able to get someone to do the complete opposite to what they feel like they need to do for a race weekend, so I would know it would benefit them, but it's so hard for them to realize that at the time. But come the race day, it turns out the exact way that I thought it, and I think that's probably the special moments that you take from the job.
Just so we move on for the next subject, I want to ask Kenta about Petrópolis. How was your experience in Brazil?
Wow is probably my biggest word.
Why?
Honestly, it's probably the craziest World Cup I've ever been to. Even as a rider, whatever, I always thought Fort William Downhill was the most special place that you could think of, just because it's a home crowd and this and that. But when I went to Berlin, seeing the fans and seeing how much they were super into racing in general, it took me by surprise, to be honest.
What exactly?
Like normally you go to a World Cup and the person who comes 30th, like they wouldn't sign an autograph or anything, but like in Brazil, I think they knew who was who on the circuit, who does what, the staff, just the whole team. They must just really follow each individual team and realize what people do for the team. And I think that was crazy to me, because I didn't think that people followed it in that much depth, the top riders, the stars, but they just kind of had this inner passion that was very different to any other race.
Yeah, I'm gonna excuse myself, but I'm gonna give myself some kudos, because as the Red Bull commentator, I was always making sure I highlighted the work of the peloton and the girls and the guys who were doing their best, but they were not in the camera on the top 10. So
no way.
I kind of like, I'm really happy to hear that. And, I'm proud to say that I helped a little bit for people to know, other riders.
No, for sure, because I think it's special for the riders that they never win, or they do their best, and everyone does their best at the race, but to be recognized, just for even finishing, I think is a massive confidence boost.
And it takes a crowd of riders. It takes a lot of riders to create a good racing environment. If it was only the top 20 riders, then it's, what's happening there? You need 60 riders. You need someone to arrive top 60, top 70, top 80, and they're still fighting hard. They still have a hero story to show up on the start line, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think everyone puts the same work as everyone. It's just, I guess, some things click for some riders and opportunities or stuff like that. So it's all very different and backgrounds, so everyone does. They're not on the start line just because they can. I think everyone puts in enough work to be there, and they deserve to be there.
Yeah, and I think one road, just to add, Viviane, is that Henrique is a superb human being, an athlete, and having this on his backyard in ETAPA, everybody that could went there. Myself, I resented not being there because it was a historical event, even though I'm not a hardcore mountain biker. So I think that plays a factor on, there have been many years where a stage of the World Cup happened in Brazil, but that it did happen, and it was not just a coincidence. Henrique worked on that and many other people. But I think that's also a significant contributor on the audience, the engagement, the level of interest that everybody had. And let's hope that it occurs in the following years.
Yeah, for sure. I think Henry's definitely put Brazil on the map, and he's firmly put it on the map, not just by being on the front of Red Bull races or World Cups or winning them. I think, like you say, the effort he put in just to make sure that Brazil had a World Cup at some sort of venue, I think pretty special. And I was lucky enough to hang around with him on the run up and also after the event, and you could just see the energy that he took from the crowd. But obviously there's only so much energy you've got if you build something up to be the biggest thing in your life. So yeah, fair play.
Did you think the track was dangerous at all?
No, I think a lot of people complained about it. I heard a lot of whispers and a lot of people asking me the same question, but at the end of the day, I knew everyone could ride everything. Everything was built, not too crazy. I believe that in the future it can go that way. So I think for me personally, it was cool to see that they built something that was different to everywhere else we ride, but they also went out their way to fix the things that were deemed dangerous, which at the end of the day, they changed the set and put wood there in the gap. But by the end of the weekend, nobody was touching the wood. So it just goes to show the features just looked really, really crazy, but in reality, they all worked.
So just to finish, this is going to be my last subject. Why do you love what you do?
That's a good question. I guess it's a bit weird for me in a sense of I love bikes and I love racing and I love everything to do with mountain bike. And I guess for me, I had a career that I felt like I never fulfilled, and I feel a bit frustrated at times because of injuries and not getting the opportunities to really build my career. So I think it took me a bit of time transitioning, but I now start enjoying helping other people achieve what they want to achieve. And if I can give anything that I've learned from my mistakes or what I thought worked well and it makes them faster, then that's the enjoyment, I guess, now.
Do you ever consider going back to racing now that you have even more maturity and new things in life other than just racing? Maybe that could, put you in a new mental place and please yourself as a racer, or you're done with that?
I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't like to race. I think everyone asks me it all the time, but I feel like I'm 30 now, and at some point you need to make a career or you need to make a decision in your life. And I feel like if I was racing again, I would, it would take me a few years to try and get going. And then by that time, you're kind of thinking of retiring, because I guess a career in any sport doesn't last so long. And especially there's some unique people out there that can do it for a long time, but I don't feel like I'm one of those people. So I feel like I'm quite settled and I do enjoy what I do just as much as I probably would racing.